Good morning, everyone, and welcome to what promises to be the most fascinating conversation today, and that is the rise of robots in surgery. There aren't many applications on fields that are moving this fast, and it's very exciting to see how surgeons, engineers, innovators are working together to reshape the future of patient care. We are so incredibly fortunate to have a remarkable panel of experts here to cover this topic with us. We have the godfather of robotics here. We have two world-class surgeons. We have CEO of a robotic company here, and Chief Scientific Officer of Alcon is also here to cover this topic with us. This is a rare privilege to be able to have all these experts in one room so that they can tell us where robots are going in ophthalmology. And I look forward to hear your perspective. I want to thank you. And with that, I turn it to my co-moderator to get the meeting started.
Thank you, Reza. It's a true pleasure to be with all of you. Welcome. As Reza has mentioned, it's really incredible to have such amazing panel here. We're really leaders, surgeons, and innovators. And before we get started, we just want to get a sense of kind of feeling in the room. We have a poll question for you, and we would love for you to answer. We will release the results at the end of the session. I'll ask the poll question to come up, please. And the question is, when do you think cataract or retina surgery will perform by robots in the US? Is this in the next 5 years, 5 to 10, or more than 10 years from now? Please help us answer this, and we will look at these answers later. Wonderful. Now we're going to transition to our speaker. It is a true privilege and an honor to have Fred Moll here with us. As you mentioned, as you've heard, really the robotic surgery innovation has very much been under his breath. And he's going to share with us a little bit about robotic surgery in general, evolution, but also how ophthalmology fits in that space. Thank you, Fred. Please join us on the podium.
Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here, and it's the first time I've been called the godfather of robotics, but that's better than grandfather. So I wanted to talk about robotic, give you a little bit of history, my history of journey through development of robotics, and I think with the idea sort of sets the stage for, I think the big question in ophthalmology is why robotics? What's the need? Where is the development going, and how is it driven by that need? And I think it's very clear. And so just to talk a little bit about where I've been in the last 30 years. See here. I was lucky enough to be trained in surgery in a time where the idea of minimally invasive technique was more of an idea than a practice. And the first time I saw laparoscopic surgery, sort of lights went on for me, and I said, being trained in general surgery, why isn't this a better technique for more than just gynecology, which is when it was first used, it was used generally in just gynecologic procedures. Got very excited about it, and for very obvious reasons. You do less of an incision, the patients are going to do better, quicker recovery, less risk of infection. So got very involved in laparoscopic innovation generally, and was not thinking about a robot, was thinking about how laparoscopic technique could broaden its scope from where it was in the 80s and 90s to doing many more procedures in a controlled fashion. And what I quickly found in that journey was that laparoscopic surgery looked great from the outside, but if you looked at the actual surgical technique that was going on the inside, you had extremely well-trained general surgeons that couldn't tie a knot. And this, in my mind, was very concerning, and I think we all know that the idea of trying to do manual surgery with long sticks, no wrist and digit capability, is a challenging thing. Can you take out a gallbladder? Yes. Can you do other things in the abdomen with manual technique? Of course. But it was, to me, there was a lot of warning signals as to this technique has to evolve. And was lucky enough to be introduced to the Stanford Research Institute's work in what they called Robotics, and it was a military Department of Defense funded project that had the idea that they were going to intervene in large vessel injury in the battlefield remotely. And so it wasn't minimally invasive by any means, but it was a transmission of surgeon capability from a mass unit to the battlefield. To me, the idea of transmitting hand movement from outside the body to inside the body is what this suggested, that if one could control and scale movement and give back to the clinician the attributes of wrist and digital movement, there was a great future in doing very precise tasks. And this is an example of a coronary artery anastomosis, which was our first application in robotics. And as everyone knows, it's gone from, we started in cardiac surgery. That was really tough going. Once we found prostate, then the prostatectomy procedure went much more smoothly. And since then, there has been a rapid acceptance of robotics in urology, gynecology, general surgery, and other professions. We got a lot of, because we were early and because there was no one else in the field, we got a lot of publicity. We also went through what I call the 4 stages of painful acceptance of any new technical technology in surgery, where you have a group of clinicians that are trained to do things over and over again in a certain way, and to break that cycle of surgical technique is a very challenging one. We were accused of introducing something that was not only a bad idea, it was dangerous. It took it's taken almost 30 years since we started Intuitive to get to a point where I think people are willing to accept the idea that robotics can be safe and have a clinical value. So to pull it all back to ophthalmology, I think you have to ask the question, why does a procedure like cardiac surgery need a robot? And I think it really comes back to clinical need. What are you adding to a procedure? And from a physician's perspective, are you doing a good thing for the patient? And I think the answer is yes. And I mean, full disclosure, I'm a investor and board member of Foresight Robotics. But I think this idea of using a robot is a very, in ophthalmology and specifically in cataract surgery, is a very legitimate one because of the ability to dial in precision and the ability to make very exacting movements. And I'll give you an example. I was just in Panama, and we were doing the first human trial of using robotics for placement of aneurysm occluders. And brain surgery is obviously one of those, I would say, microsurgical specialties that really demand very precise movement, and the stakes are very high. And I think ophthalmology is in that category, and what it demands, again, is the control of movement of instruments that can go beyond the capabilities of humans to do that well, or do it as well as one would like to do it. And so the idea of involving robotics in things like cataract surgery, I think, does go directly to a need in clinical medicine of exacting movement that goes beyond what is able to be trained in most people's hands most of the time. And I think the sort of goes to the general theme of robotics, which it maybe doesn't allow for brave new procedures to be done, which sort of what I thought when we started, that we were going to do all sorts of new things with a robot. The fact of the matter is, I think the impact of robotics is to raise the level of capability among a general population of surgeons that are doing a particular procedure, raise the average capability. There's always great surgeons that are never going to need a robot, and then there's always going to be surgeons that will benefit very much from robotic capability. And I think that is an important value creation point that robotics can drive. So I'll stop there, but would say that I'm very certain that robotics will play a very important part of ophthalmologic surgery going forward, and excited to be a small part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you for that fascinating overview of how far surgical robotics have come and where ophthalmology fits in that journey. Now, we would love to kind of address some of the questions to our panelists and bring it back to real world, particularly the operating room. And I would love to start with the questions for our really leading surgeons that are here on a panel for us, David Chang and Alan Ho. First question for both of you. What problems can robotics uniquely solve in ophthalmic surgery? David, you want to take it on first?
From the large, big picture standpoint, it's scale, right? Because we have a huge manpower shortage that we're going to face in the next decade. We've faced it historically in low to middle income countries, and for 2 decades have tried to scale just being able to do basic cataract surgery. And for all the reasons that you know, it's so difficult to train someone, all the effort that goes into residencies, and some of the residents will go into retina or they won't be doing cataract surgery. Some people discover they're not dexterous enough. So if you could get a fully autonomous system, and once you do train it with this AI learning software, you now can just multiply that. It's hardware and software, and really moving forward, solve manpower.
Thank you. Alan, comments on that?
Yeah, manpower is one way to approach it, and I think cataract surgery might be a little bit different than the challenges of retina surgery. Cataract surgery has more predictable surgical maneuvers. It requires precision. It requires accuracy. There's good visualization. I see, most surgeons saying, why do we need a robot? Like, we can do a cataract surgery, I can do my retinal surgery. So there is increased precision. You do maybe democratize the level of care. I think for training, for 25 years, I've trained retina fellows, over 100 fellows. Gifted surgeons are rare. I've seen probably about 5 out of 100 who are truly gifted. And the elements of being a gifted surgeon are twofold. One is knowing what to do, what to grasp, where to go with your device. And 2, doing the maneuvers. We don't let our first-year fellows do it because they have neither of those skills. They haven't ridden the bike enough. But we can maybe train better if we can democratize the execution of what they want to do or what they need to learn to do, by getting them in the driver's seat sooner because we can describe what they're going to do. I think visualization becomes a key part of retina robotic surgery moving forward. I think we can improve our ability to see things behind the iris. I think with 3D visualization, Z-axis coordinates, we can do better jobs in traction retinal detachments. I think with motion detection systems, where there's more unpredictability, for example, in a retinal detachment where an instrument is moving towards mobile retina and you don't want to cut it, I think when the visualization begins to jive with the robotic maneuvers, and JP can attest, he's another great surgeon on this panel. I think that's when we'll do things better. I do think we'll move into doing new things, Fred. I think retina, for example, suprachoroidal surgery, operating on a myopic or myopia schisis where we haven't been able to operate behind the eye. I think the robot with visualization will allow us to do some new things.
So the first thing in cataract surgery will, of course, not be fully autonomous. It'll be a robotic assist. And I think there, just a lot of people struggle with using their left hand in cataract surgery. And I think only about 25% of surgeons actually do phaco chop, and it's because it requires the left hand. So if you now can have that dexterity and steadiness from a robotic arm, that would be, in the short term, the robotic assist.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah, Fred, as you have seen this in many applications, want to share some pitfalls that you want to give advice to entrepreneurs here who are starting robotics in ophthalmology to avoid those, to go faster?
Yeah, so, it's very important. It was great we started with the investor perspective on, investing in medtech. And, robotics are one part of medtech that you cannot, sort of wander into it casually. It's very expensive. It takes a long time. And I think if you look at the history of the recent history of development of robotics, what Intuitive would call the ankle biters, but the newer companies that have tried to enter robotics, I think the challenge associated with the need for a lot of money and a extremely talented engineering team and significant amount of time to get it right is a high bar for entrepreneurs in that it's an enormous commitment and it's now, instead of when we started Intuitive, we had the great luxury of being the only one that was interested in doing it. Now everyone's interested in robotics. And you see some of the results of either inadequately funded or inadequately engineered systems that really don't have a lot of clinical value. And when, I didn't talk a lot about the progression of software and the use of AI in robotics generally, but I think it's an enormous new sort of wave of capability that's going to be given to robotics, which does push it towards more automated capability. But all of this is, extraordinarily sophisticated from the standpoint of both the hardware and the software. And so I guess my cautionary note to entrepreneurs in robotics is you really need to want to do this because it's going to take a long time, it's going to take a lot of money, and it takes a extraordinarily talented collaboration between hardware engineers, software engineers, electrical engineers, and control theory experts. And if you don't have the best and the brightest, I think it's going to become a very competitive field to succeed in.
Thanks. So what gets you excited about robotics in ophthalmology, and what advice do you give for better products in ophthalmology? What lessons that?
Yeah. Well, I'm not, first of all, what I knew about ophthalmology, I forgot a long time ago. So I can't opine on what are the great new, horizons for new techniques to treat diversity of diseases in eye surgery. What I would say is that sort of the core capability of, and Dr. Chang mentioned, just the ability to utilize better the left hand. And it's so funny he says that, because when I was just in Panama and we were doing these catheter-based robotic procedures, the neurosurgeon said, the hardest thing I have to do is to remind the resident to use their left hand when they have to move two catheters at once, and they always forget about the left hand, and you get into trouble because of it. And so these, the ability to take over steps in a procedure, yes, make them more precise, but also automate certain movements and put what we call guardrails around technique, I think are the areas in which ophthalmology will benefit, and the areas in which one should concentrate in development of robotics.
Thanks.
Well, we're going to switch gears to regulatory and evidence. We had hoped to have a little bit of an FDA perspective today, but we're going to actually have our industry leaders help us with that as well. We know that having really an idea, a concept, and then clinical validation is obviously very important, but even more so important is a regulatory strategy. So I'm going to start with Franck and ask you a question from an industry perspective. What kinds of clinical benefits do you believe are the most important to demonstrate when introducing robotics in ophthalmology?
Yeah, so I would start first by saying, from a regulatory standpoint, for most robotic systems, the pathway to approval will be either a Class 2 or a PMA approval. And most likely, if we go to a fully autonomous system, the bar will be higher and it will be a Class 3 pathway. Now, you were asking me about clinical evidence, but I will start with preclinical evidence. I think, and I'm not an FDA representative here, but I think if I were in the shoes of FDA, I would request, first of all, very intensive technical and safety preclinical testing to show that the device works as intended, to demonstrate that the performance of the device is repeated consistently. And of course, these systems contain a huge software component, so I would request a lot of software validation, and I would pay a lot of attention on cybersecurity items. This is for the preclinical stage. Now, clinical stage, I think, depending on where the bar is, if it is a 510K, I think you still need to demonstrate, of course, safety first, right, and efficacy. So this is done through clinical trials, of course, and you will have to demonstrate that the system is consistently, again, behaving as intended and delivering the outcomes that are expected. When we talk about a 510K, we often talk about substantial equivalence to manual, right? So you will have to agree with the regulatory authority how you're going to demonstrate some kind of substantial equivalence to manual. If we talk about now fully autonomous system where the bar will be higher, I would say, there will be additional concerns to be taken care of. For example, how do we take care of, cases that are complications that occur during the surgery? How is the system going to react to that? What are the safeguards that are being built in case something happens? And how are we going to ensure human monitoring during the procedure? I believe, the way to approve all of these systems will be through a path of step-by-step validation, clinical and preclinical. For example, if you take cataract procedure where the steps are very well defined, you can decompose the procedure in each step. Incision, capsulotomy, fragmentation of the lens, etc., etc. And then you can perform the validation for each of these steps and then holistically demonstrate that the whole procedure is safe and effective. I think regulatory approval of an autonomous system will include a lot of post-market surveillance. And we know using Gen AI that the system will be learning all the time, right? How to do the procedure in a better way through videos from other surgeons all over the world. So I guess there will be a need for some recertification of the system as it is learning more and more with time. And then there will be the question of the training and the certification of the surgeon providing the monitoring. There will always be an oversight, right? And of the staff that will be still necessary in VOR. All in all, I just want to remind everybody that we already have robotic surgery in ophthalmology. Refractive surgery is a great example of robotic surgery. The doctor performs all the planning steps, but then presses a button and the laser takes care of the whole surgery. So it's nothing really completely new to the industry. Of course, here people are more fearful, but I believe, especially the newer generations who are used to use joysticks and so on, will actually engage very much with that. Like Fred said, I think one of the main benefits is going to be how it's going to increase the standard of the outcomes. Not every surgeon, we have a Gaussian distributions of skills in surgeons, and I think it will help make every surgeon a better surgeon or a great surgeon. And I believe it's going to take less than 10 years to see all these systems in place.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you for providing that perspective from regulatory. We're going to switch gears a little bit to business side of things, and Jean-Pierre, I would love to start with you. What do you think are challenges are unique to building a robotics company compared to a traditional medtech company?
So I would echo what Fred said. Robotic platforms are very complex systems involving actually multiple different products. It's including visualization system, which can be just by itself a product. There is also some robotic arms, some software, some AI, some disposable. So I really would think that robotic with the complexity requires a bigger team, much more expertise and experience, knowledge. And then there's the integration of all this. So it takes more time, it takes more money, but the potential reward is higher because it can help the surgeon on all the different aspects of surgery, which are visualization, decision, and manipulation. And so that can really transform how surgery is performed and help every surgeon to achieve much better outcomes and more consistent outcomes. So it's a more complex system. It requires, again, experience from engineers in robotic, optic, AI, software, disposable. So it's a big team with a large experience, and you need to source the people from different industries. It's not just medtech. It's like medtech, automotive, automation, medical device, ophthalmology. So it's a very unique team sharing different skill sets.
So go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I think one of the really interesting questions with regard to robotics and ophthalmology, because I believe there will be sort of a stepwise development of starting with part of a procedure that has a robotic component and a pathway to full automation. And I think if that's the way it develops, there's going to be an enormous need for continuous clinical trials. And the challenge, of course, is the difference between the U.S. and the rest of the world is very, very different regulations with regard to the performance of clinical trials and the need to get approvals to even begin. And if there is a long pathway for development to automation, I'm interested in, sort of the idea of, is the FDA going to consider OUS clinical trials in the same, with the same sort of scrutiny that it has in the past, which has been sort of an eye to, that data is okay, but we really want U.S. confirmation of really everything you're doing, and be interested in, your views on that. Yeah.
Well, again, I'm not FDA, so I cannot comment really, but I would think that if you propose clinical results from a clinical trial that has been very well designed, right, and that has all the components that FDA would want to see, I don't see any reason for them not accepting it. They may still ask for some data, domestic data, right? But I think, there exists a process with FDA, which is the Q-sub process, where you can go and, show your plans, and once you've done your trials OUS, you can show what you've done and get feedback on that, which can, in turn, help you design the next trials better. So I think there should be some openness, at least, to that.
Yes, I would like to make a comment as well on the automation, because everybody is talking about automation, but there is a spectrum of automation. It's like the self-driving cars. It's like there are different levels of automation, and we can go with system assisting the surgeon at different level and getting approval with different level of assistance, and moving up incrementally. So it's not like a system will be completely autonomous and there is no surgeon. Obviously, we need a surgeon. The surgeon will still be the main person driving the surgery, but we can, over time, allow the system to do more and more and assisting the surgeon that way.
Yeah, to add on what you are saying, JP, I believe, the path to the commercialization is going to start with a lot of surgical guidance under the surgeon direction, right? The surgeon will still make the decisions, will still drive the machine towards more and more autonomy of the system with time.
So we're going to move to other topics than clinical. JP, congratulations on the recent clinicals that you guys did. Just a question to you or Franck. Who is going to ultimately pay for this? And does this require, from the beginning, to think about that? Is going to be ultimately self-pay? Should companies start thinking of initially randomized trial, go for reimbursement? I don't know who wants to take this question.
So you want to go, or I can? Okay, all right. I will give it a try, at least. So first of all, I would say the business model has to create value for the doctors, for the patients, and for the practice. And this is my hypothesis. I don't know, I cannot read the future with certainty, but I believe there's a place to start with this system in a premium segment as a way to improve the patient experience and also potentially to improve outcomes. And there would be a patient pay component into that. Now, for this system to become something used for mainstream procedures, I think here there has to be an economic value that is demonstrated, either through efficiencies that it creates in VOR, or the reliability of the outcomes, the reliability of the procedures, as we said, improving, standardizing the outcomes of the surgery, whoever the surgeon is. And then that could be a path towards generalization of this technology to everything. In any case, it's going to take time. Adoption is going to take time, and we're going to see how this is going to evolve.
So, JP, you want to say, sorry, Fred, you want to add something to that?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, given, sort of the enormous volumes of, in cataract surgery, if that's where robotics start in ophthalmology, I think the metric is going to have to be efficiency. I mean, you obviously have to do extremely, good surgery, but I think to add an important capability to cataract surgery, the number one need, I would think, would be efficiency because of the volume constraints.
So the question, you want to add to this topic?
I agree that, first it needs to bring value to the patient, but in ophthalmology, efficiency is a key element.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that compared to other fields where robotic was not really demonstrating efficiency in ophthalmology, robotic system can really improve the workflow and improve the throughput. So I think that it can really eventually drop the price of the surgery.
So Franck, a question, when you look at various dimensions of these companies, clinical results, regulatory approval, reimbursement, with the recent tariffs, the supply chain, at what point in this journey these companies could be an attractive to strategics?
Yeah, this is a space we are definitively monitoring, and we don't disclose usually what we are doing, so I'm not going to disclose anything, but we are very interested in that field, and we have started to invest internally and externally, and we believe that robotic surgery is going to play a meaningful role in ophthalmology in the future. To me, I was at the SRS conference, the Society of Robotic Surgery. I think, Fred, you were there too, in Strasbourg. When you look at outside ophthalmology areas, it is starting to becoming, something that is going to be fully adopted. It took 30 years, but I think, and we are late in the game because the systems did not allow for the precision that is needed, but now this barrier has been overcome. I think we're going to learn a lot from what happens in the other specialties, and this is going to help us accelerate actually the adoption. So I am personally very optimistic, and I really believe in robotic. It's going to be part of the landscape of the future in an OR.
So JP, you want to quickly say what your company does? I mean, this is not about companies. And also, follow-up question, because this is so new, where do you find talent?
So we are building obviously a robotic platform dedicated for ophthalmology with cataract as its first application. I'm thrilled to announce that we actually 2 weeks ago entered the clinical phase. We started the clinical phase with a successful first human. So I'm really convinced that this technology, as I mentioned before, combining visualization, machine learning, robotic technology, all these integrated will help surgeons achieve much better outcomes and more consistent outcomes and standardized outcome, and will improve efficiency as well, because as we said before, efficiency is a key element in ophthalmology to be widely adopted.
Ellen?
We do have a regulator in the audience. I see Malvina, who might be able to find offline later. Efficiency for cataract surgery, I think, can bring value. I think it can democratize care if we can get, you think about it, it's kind of counterintuitive. What about a robot in a third world country where they're struggling handling cataract surgery? But maybe it can raise the level of care, shift the Gaussian curve to the right. For retinal surgery, I think the value will be created when we can better handle the complexities of retinal surgery. That's where I think we can maybe demonstrate more outcome. We're less efficient, and that's because of complexities. And when visualization brings in 3D control, 3D visualization with the robotics. I mean, think about the data that we could generate from that. We could basically have an iris type registry for surgery, and that would allow us to improve our techniques and improve outcomes and elevate the bar for safety. That's where I think robotics can bring retinal surgery. And by the way, robotics and retinal surgery is clinical. There were 7 cases in France in 2024 with one platform. So we are in an era of robotic surgery.
We're just going to switch gears to training and safety and just quickly address that for our surgeons, for David and Alan specifically. What does training for you look like to use this technology, and what kind of safeguards need to be in place?
So the semi-autonomous is basically you're sitting at a workstation using these robotic arms, and I think the first step is you need to do something like ingenuity, because you're not looking through a microscope, but we have those skills. We've had a heads-up display with looking at a 3D monitor, and it's very much the same. Because when you do that, you're not hunched over the eye, and in this case, you're 10 feet away from the eye. There are basically little skill sets that you can do without an eye just to practice. And then when you're there this is my experience just with an animal eye, it's very, very fast. It's the same operation as doing it through, again, an Ingenuity 3D display. So I don't think that's going to be a big jump.
And Alan, comments, what kind of safeguards, if you could just address that?
Safeguards, of course, need to be very high when we're talking about the delicate tissues in the front or the back of the eye. You talk about tolerances. I just saw a friend who had his internal mammary artery sutured to his left anterior descending artery by Fred's machine, essentially. We're talking about tolerances that are the ILM that we peel all the time is basically 1 to 2 microns. And so the safeguards have to be engineering, precision, software that are at that level of specificity and capability. I've tried the robot. It's a console where the surgeon sits in a cockpit. It's intuitive because you manipulate 2 hands that control 2 independent robotic pods to do robotics retinal surgery. It's a 3D monitor. Visualization, I think 3D systems maybe came a little too early because not many people use them, but now with robotic surgery and digitization in 3 dimensions of space, that allows for precision, and those are the safeguards that need to be done. It took me, the surgeon that did the retinal surgery did 2.5 days of training, a day in the lab, a day in a wet lab, and half a day to set it up in the OR, and she did surgery.
Fantastic, thank you. We have just a couple of questions, a little bit of lightning round. Reza, you want to take it, start it?
On the lightning questions, or?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to ask kind of similar questions that we ask the audience. Can start with you, and I go through. When do you think robotics become a mainstream in ophthalmology? Fred, how long from now?
I think mainstream, and I'm not quite sure how you're going to define that, but I think it has a very significant impact in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they will be commercially available within the next few years, but I am convinced that the adoption will be pretty quick because it will really help surgeons in many different ways.
Yeah, I think maybe even 3 years we'll have commercial systems that, much like femtosecond laser in the United States, will be a very specialized premium market. But that's going to be the stepping stone to something more fully autonomous with surgeon supervision, one surgeon supervising 3 or 4 operations, letting each step be checked before you move on. And I think it may take a market like China where there's a government mandate really to replace their diminishing workforce with robotics. And I can see there with a market where you have so much volume to do, and then sort of a government oversight of how to do it most efficiently, that really flourishes there.
Yeah, I would say the rate of development of these technologies is very fast. Why? Because there's no invention needed anymore. The robotic arms exist with the precision needed. Visualization, 3D analog visualization, and OCT provides real-time visualization. Software and Gen AI is now doing marvelous things everywhere. So it's about integrating all the technologies. So I would say, within the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to see the first systems being approved and starting commercialization. Now, fully autonomous systems will take longer, but I would bet less than 10 years. And I think the commercialization adoption will be slower than the development of the technology pace, because it's all about changing habits and adopting it right in the ORs and so on, and demonstrating the value creation. But I think it's going to be a faster process than what it did in other fields, because we're going to learn from what has been done by Intuitive in particular. They drove the market. We're going to learn from them.
When we have regulatory approval, perhaps in 2028, commercialization of one system, stepwise robotic guidance, as JP alluded to, not autonomous. And for Retina, when we have payers that pay, there may be a premium channel. And when it makes things easier and better for the surgeon to accomplish difficult, complex tasks, that's when it will happen.
I average about 3.5 years. So.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time a little bit, so I'll just ask for the poll question to come up to see what our audience opinion was. I think it pretty much agrees with the panelists. In the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see this technology in our ORs.
I want to thank the panelists. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective. That's very informative. Really appreciate taking the time and sharing this with us. Thank the audience and.
Thank you. Thank you. And the next is going to follow a break and sponsored by Ocular Therapeutics. Thank you so much.
Thank you.